Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second series of LinkedIn Lives. This time, we're interviewing 8 of our clients to share their stories and learnings on the way, because let's face it, finding your first customers is really tough. So excited to have Lee McQueen on today. We've been working together for most of this last year, and Phoenix is really in a massive growth period at the moment. So we're super excited to speak to Lee and hear about his journey. So, Lee, first of all, just tell me, how did you get into tech? Like, what was your journey from sort of get your first job into now being a tech founder and raising your next round?
Good afternoon, everybody. Viewers and listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And Lucy, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Maybe unlike most of your guests, I'm going to say that I kind of fluked it, to be honest. My background is quite interesting for me anyway, because I feel that hard work and determination and resilience is a kind of a platform that is I suppose forms successful businesses in the future. And of course, rewinding all the way to my childhood, I didn't know that at the time, but I grew up in a house in northwest London, in a social house, or a council house. They used to call it council house. My mum and dad, they worked really hard. My dad's a milkman, 42 years. So ultimately, he used to go out and graft really hard. And I think I got my grounding from my parents quite an early age on that. Actually, if you fast forward now as to some of the stuff that we have to do as business owners, some of the stuff that we have to do, as senior leaders in the businesses that we're in, it's quite basic of stuff that you learned all them years ago, which I think is why it's relevant. But I think I fluked it. I worked in catering at Harrow School, one of the most prestigious private schools in the country, in catering for about 4 years. And I met one of my school friends actually that was in Harrow at the time, where I worked, and he had this lovely suit on and he had this big watch on, and I was like, "Wow, Pete, what are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm in recruitment." I said, "Wow, what's that?" And he said, "Oh, you get paid commission. It's a sales type opportunity, but you talk to people every day and get to know people, build relationships, and then you put them into jobs." And I was like, "Wow, I think I can do that." So about a week later, I went for an interview at one of the big recruitment recruitment process outsourcing firms, got the job, and I've been in recruitment for the last 22 years.
Amazing. And then how did you come to applying for The Apprentice?
Well, this is interesting actually. So I had a couple of jobs in recruitment to get my kind of foundation. I worked for Hayes, my first ever job, and they were excellent in terms of training, development, and really got me to kind of understand my trade, if you like. And then I worked for a couple of boutiques and was pretty well thought of. I mean, I was their top biller there for a good few months, and I ended up working as a recruitment consultant at a company called Capita, or the IT version of a part of the BPO world of Capita. And I ended up working my way up to being a sales and delivery manager at the time. So I had a business 32 million turnover, had about 30 staff working for me. And one of my team actually came in one morning and he put a post-it note on a apprentice application form and just wrote, "Fill me out." And I was like, okay, why not? So I ripped off the post-it note, filled out the application form. And I didn't think anything of it, Lucy, to be honest. I just thought, that'll probably just go in the bin with everything else. But 2 weeks later, I actually got a phone call to say, "We'd like to see you for an interview," and then another interview, and then another interview, and then 7 interviews later, I was actually on safari in Africa, and I got a phone call on my old BlackBerry. Do you remember them, the BlackBerries? I had a phone call from The Apprentice. They said, "We'd like to have you on the shows. You made the top 16." So that's kind of where it started, really.
Incredible. And then how did you go from focusing on doing the recruitment to actually building a tech platform to help others do recruitment?
Yeah, interesting story. So I ended up winning The Apprentice. I think I need to put that on there just in case people are thinking, what is he talking about The Apprentice? So yeah, I'm not talking about because I've got fired in week 2 or whatever. I'm talking about because I won it. So I won The Apprentice, and I worked for Lord Sugar and his son Simon for a couple of years, 2.5 years. We built a digital media business. And what that really showed me is it gave me the courage, the conviction, the confidence really to say, do you know what? You can start a business and you can do something from scratch. So after a couple of years of working within the Anscreen business, I decided to set my own company up, and that was a recruitment business because that's what I knew. That's what my passion was. My passion is people. But I wanted to set something up, Lucy, that was different to what was already out there. So back then, and it's changed a lot now, but back then in 2000, and this would have been 2011. So kind of 11 years ago or so. Back then, a lot of organizations were taking early career programs on, or they were taking on graduates, and that's what they were doing. They were calling them grads. So it was grad programs, and we want grads. And grads at the time meant young, bright things, right? If I'm honest, but everybody always said it has to be a grad, And there's some fantastic players out there, Metamorphosis, Pareto Law that's still going today, the market leader, Graduate Fast Track, all these grad-centric companies. But you didn't have an organization that was focusing on the wider talent pool, people that didn't have a degree, that wasn't graduates, but were amazing people, early careers. So I set up a company called Raw Talent Academy, which basically built sales academies for organizations that were looking for people that had the right behaviors and contribute and competencies and attributes, rather than focus on a piece of paper. So as you can probably tell, I'm still on my soapbox, Lucy, ripping up that resume, rip up that CV and hire based on behaviors and competencies. And we built a really, really good business. The business went global. We were operating from the UK, but we were servicing clients that were in the US, in Australia, in mainland Europe, in Asia. And it was a fantastic business. But what was happening is we was getting all this brilliant data into the business via our behaviors and our competencies and our assessment, but we wasn't being able to reuse that data because it was all spreadsheets and pens and paper and all this type of stuff. And the clients liked it for a one-off, but they then couldn't reuse it. So not that long ago, about 3 years ago, I decided to spend brilliantly or stupidly, I don't know, I have to wait and see, but loads of money on building my own platform internally, which we called SID at the time, Select, Identify and Develop. And the platform was all about housing that data so that we can make better decisions on the people that we were hiring for our clients. It was a value add. And one of our clients at the time then tapped me on the shoulder and said, can you sell us this directly? Can we have this rather than the recruitment service? And I was like, yeah, no problem. I kind of ran back to the office thinking, wow, how am I going to do this? And that started the formulation of the plan to extract the technology from a business, hence it's called Phoenix. So we extracted it from another business and we made it a standalone SaaS technology company called Phoenix51. It's called 51 because the organization was the 51st user of our platform. And it's obviously called Phoenix because we pulled it out of another business. So hence the name Phoenix51.
Amazing. And so tell me about how you got your first customer actually using Phoenix.
Well, I kind of touched upon it there. Mediacom, which is one of the large media agencies in the UK and part of the WPP group, they were a customer of ours from the recruitment side. And they were the ones that actually said, do you know what, would you sell us this directly? So I suppose our first real early adopter of our platform was Mediacom. But the actual standalone business, if you like, the first customer that we signed as a standalone business was Reach PLC. So Reach are now, I think they're on their third year with us. So even though we've been only operating 2 years, they signed with us and then they signed another extension. They've just literally signed another extension with us. In fact, a 2-year extension now. And we've become an integral part of Reach's assessment process. So they have the ability to use our tool as a recruitment assessment platform. So to watch, to look, to observe, to assess people coming into their business. But where Reach have taken it to another level is they've started to use the tool to assess their ongoing or benchmark their ongoing employers. So actually real-time assessment in their sales environment. So being able to look at the iPad, watch, see, observe, and write down feedback and real-time feedback and assess performances so that it's always developing their teams or their staff. So hiring managers or team managers have the ability to be able to use the assessment tool on an ongoing basis. So they've really embedded the tool into their thinking, not only from a talent acquisition perspective, but also from a talent management point of view as well.
Amazing. What challenges did you have when you're first getting your customers, or even what were the big challenges, and what was the big any hiccups along the way?
I think with tech, I think the biggest, and again, I just want to put it out there just for the viewers and the listeners, right? I've never sold tech before. I started this company, and we started this company in September 2020. So I am not the best tech salesperson on the planet, far from it. But what was quite interesting is when you sell a recruitment service, typically you're selling against a main problem that needs to be fixed today, which is I need a team of people. So we used to sell academies. So we need to sell 6, 8, 10 people at a time, or graduate programs or early career programs. And we'd sell a project based on how we're going to get them people into post. Does that make sense? So actually, the organization or the company has already decided they've got a hole. They need to fill it with lots of people coming in, and that's your recruitment service that you're going to do. And typically, most organizations know what a recruitment service is, right? Most organizations. And of course, there's brilliant recruitment services out there. There's brilliant outsourcing services. There's agency services as well. And they all do things slightly different. But in the main, you kind of know that we're going to get new people into your organization. With technology, it's very different, because ultimately you are solving a problem, a pain point today, but it might be viewed as other parts of the business is not as imperative as some of the parts of the business. So what you're having to do is having to work alongside, I suppose, your champion. So to find somebody internally that has a champion and needs to work with, and then to start to nurture that relationship over maybe a longer period of time, not always, but over a longer period of time. But also as well, then you start finding, for example, your economic buyer. So your economic buyer might be somebody different to your champion. So you've got somebody who really wants to work with you and really wants to get your technology into the business. But if the economic buyer is not bought in or doesn't want to sign it off, then you're never going to get your technology in there. So I think it's working the same way. There's multiple people to sell to. I think with technology, it's even further, because by the time you've got your economic buyer on board, and by the time you've got your champion on board, you might then need IT to get on board, data processes and data policy to be on board. And these sorts of things that you probably don't think of right at the beginning of that sales cycle. And I think that the successful deals that we've done so far have been based on multiple relationships within that sales cycle, rather than just kind of one person.
And so it's understanding the different messages, the different benefits that they're looking for, and how you communicate that.
Yeah, exactly. So just to interact with you there, if I may. So for example, a CFO or somebody in procurement might be looking for something, or will be looking for something different to what the hiring manager community will be looking for, or somebody in talent acquisition, for example. Their quota is different. They're structured, without sounding uncouth, they're structured differently on bonuses. So for example, somebody who's in talent acquisition is probably driven by the amount of people that they hire, or the amount of roles that they fill within an organization. I'm being simplistic here. Whereas actually a procurement individual or CFO, for example, will be driven by cost. I mean, that's an obvious one, but just to highlight the example. So it's really understanding that, are we saving the business money? Are we making the business more efficient? Are we giving them key data points that they can make better decisions? Yes, on all of the above, but who's interested in them? And actually, who do I need to go and build a relationship or nurture with in order to make sure that I'm covering all them bases? I mean, again, a real live example is that at the moment we've got a deal that is probably hanging in the balance, whereby some of the party is really keen and they want to sign the contract and get it done, and some of the party isn't so keen because of the different aspects. And now we're looking into that, say, what do we need to do to make sure that relationship is nurtured so we can get that deal over the line if indeed that we want to do that. So it's really important that you have them different aspects of relationship building.
And how it's a really common problem with all B2Bs because there's always a mix of decision makers and they come in at different stages of that sales journey as well. So how have you got any tips for people on that of how to overcome that and make sure that you're talking the same language to the right people and you're talking about, you're giving them the reasons that they are going to hire you?
Yeah, I think research and knowledge. So we all probably know the saying, "Knowledge is power." That doesn't necessarily mean you need to be clever in terms of working out what a quadratic equation is. So I definitely can't do that. But actually, the sources at our fingertips in terms of all of the stuff that we've got on our phones, on our desktops. Research, LinkedIn, understanding insights, talking to people in and around people that have worked in the business before, people that have worked for that individual or that team that you're trying to build that relationship with. All them little nuggets can help. I think it's investing the time in to do that. What I'm not saying is, sit there and research for 5 hours, procrastinate and don't get the job done. What I am saying is understand what strategic objectives are in place within that organization or within that business. And can your product or service actually help or support or take away some of them pain points that they might be looking at from a strategic perspective? And if it can, then start to nurture. I also don't think it's a one-person job. Like my business partner, Chris Wimshurst, he's a qualified business psychologist. He's just completed his master's. So he adds that credibility and substance around our competency and behavioral frameworks, for example, which maybe I don't add. So actually looking at your strengths that you've got within the team and then bringing them together, Chris might get on better with certain people in a prospect customer than I, and vice versa. And it's actually making sure that we've got that, again, that investment of time to say, right, let's make sure that we've got the right team that we're putting forward, rather than it just being a kind of a one-person role. I'm going to get that done, and actually that's where deals start to fall down.
Yeah, I think that's super smart to be able to play to your strengths and use different people for different conversations.
Sure.
Are there any big decisions you've had to make that have, I think, you go in and you go and start these things, and sometimes you don't really always know exactly what's going to come around. And is there any sort of big decisions you've had to make that have really have been really difficult to make, but also could have possibly changed the different routes you take as a business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a few. I'll just highlight a couple of them. So, in the recruitment business, raw talent, probably about 5-6 years ago, we had a junction. We come to almost like a sliding doors moment. We were doing some really big revenues, which is a little bit vanity in a service company, but we're doing big, decent revenues. But profitability was kind of on the wane. And the reason why is because the customers, so we scaled up pretty heavily with a load of staff. We had, I think it was about 35, 36 staff at the time. And so we're a small, decent sized, small established recruitment company. And at the time, what was happening is that we were incentivizing our team on revenue. So what was happening is that we was getting loads of revenue coming into the top of the funnel, fantastic, deals being done, woohoo, fantastic. But they were with bad customers. They were with bad customers. I can say that they weren't with the right kind of customer. I think it's really important that anybody that's not just starting out, but even now in a junction, what type of customer do you want to work with? What type of client do you want to work with? Is it somebody that pays on time? These might be obvious, right? But you can have your own criteria. Somebody that pays on time, somebody that works with you as a partnership, somebody, an organization that feels like that you're together, not further away. So holding you to account, being a supplier, not a partner, is a very different relationship. And what we've done is, over a period of time, is that because as a business we were targeting on revenue, drive the revenue, we were bringing on clients that weren't our core market. Does that make sense? So it wasn't right. So in the end, what happened is that the clients were leaving, or we were losing the clients, or we were moving away from the clients because they wasn't the right fit for us. And I'm hugely passionate about behavior, of course, which is why I run a tech business that is competent in behaviors, Phoenix51. But I'm a huge believer in values and behaviors that had that synergy. And if you've got completely different behaviors and values to me, and vice versa, we're probably not going to be compatible, and we're probably not going to get on. So it was really important to make a decision at that sliding doors moment to go, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to move away from this client base. We're just going to stop, and we're going to almost reinvent ourselves and go for this client base. And that client base was financial services sector, it was media sector, it was technology sector. And then three sectors started to lend itself much better to what we were delivering: the early careers program, the partnership approach, the understanding of where we wanted to be. And therefore, our top line revenue might have gone down, but our profitability went up because ultimately we were working with the right customers. So that was a big decision moment, because you could have been looking at losing 20, 30, 40% of your customer base. Actually, in our point, it was about 75, but we did it on purpose. We had to reinvent ourselves and regrow again. So we took some short-term pain to get some long-term gain off the back of that.
And those sort of decisions take a lot of confidence and a lot of conviction in knowing that you're doing it right. Do you have you got sort of your top 3 tips that we're asking everybody? It's what's your top 3 tips looking back, having gone through really the launch of 2 businesses already? What would you say to any startup founders that are just getting going, they're about to start going and finding their first customers and going out to market? What would you recommend?
I think, and in actual fact, I'd say 3 businesses, because Amscreen was a startup as well.
Yeah.
So Amscreen, Raw Talent, now Phoenix51. In every single one of them startup phases, I've gone out and met people and spoke to people and talking to people. It's not just about networking, although it's massively important. It's about conversational. If I built this, what would that do for your business? How would that look? How would that work? If I had this service, what is your pain point? How can I provide? So making sure that the idea that you have, or the business that you've got, isn't been verified just by your parents and your family and your wife or your husband or whatever, because they're always going to tell it it's good. The people that you want to verify your business is the people that are almost going to tell that it's bad or where its faults are, because that's, although you might not want to hear it, they're the nuggets. The fails that will be inevitable. Make sure, come back to the resilience part right at the beginning of the podcast, of the show. You have to be resilient. You will get knockbacks, and you probably already have. Like, you've probably been knocked back loads. You will lose deals. Not everybody will like you. You will you will have issues around getting investment, all them key things. But it's about having a pipeline of opportunities, so that actually, if you do lose one, then but you end up closing 8. That's no problem. That one that you've lost doesn't hurt you as much. The problem that you have is when you don't have a big enough pipeline in anything that you're doing, you lose one thing, and all of a sudden that's 50 or 60% of what you've got going on, and that really hurts. So I suppose off the back of that, I would make sure that you don't spread out, but make sure that you've got a good enough target client market or prospect market that enables you not to have all your eggs in one big basket. Because if that basket bursts, or if that bubble bursts, you literally got no business. So that would be, I suppose, a second tip. And the third tip would be use Phoenix51. No, the third tip would be to get really good people around you. I literally look around my board meeting, when we have a board meeting, I look around at people and I think, I have people in this room, or in this virtual room, that are miles better than me at certain things, and probably most things, to be fair. I'm definitely the least intelligent person in the room. But I don't mind that, because I think that in order for my business to be successful, or Phoenix51, our business, to be successful, I have to have brilliant people around me to make that happen. And also, just quickly off the back of that, if you are having brilliant minds and brilliant people to advise you, you don't have to take their advice, but then you have to then question why you're paying them so much money if you're not going to take their advice. So there is a balance there as well. You know, us founders sometimes think we know it all, sometimes, but we also know that we always need to be learning. Like, honestly, Lucy, I've learned more in the last 2 years than I probably did whilst I was working in a corporate. And I worked in a corporate for a long time. I ended up going back to Capita. I was at Capita. I was the interim managing director of Capita IT Resourcing for a long period of time, reporting into the executive directors and this type of stuff. And in a corporate world, it's very, very different to running your own business. You do make decisions based more on emotion, and that's also quite difficult. And I'm not saying I've mastered that. I'm a heart and sleeve kind of guy. I am an emotional kind of character. When you're having to make a decision about, do I turn this business down, which sounds very egotistical, but it's not meant to be, but do I turn this bit of business down because I know deep down it's not good for my company and good for our business, or do I take the money knowing that it's going to give me a pain and a headache 3, 4, 5 months down the road? They're tough decisions, especially if you ain't got £1 million in the bank and you don't need to worry, right? So you're always spinning lots of different plates in that decision making. And I had one of my colleagues actually this week say to me, "Oh, when you go on holiday, you should put the phone down and you should not get on email." And it is impossible. Right now, that for me is impossible because I have to be involved, and maybe I will learn not to be, but right now I have to be. So yeah, some top tips. If you can get some downtime, try and get some downtime. But culturally, I think there's been a lot of work done over the last, certainly a couple of years, 18 months, a couple of years, maybe 2-3 years or so, culturally to get that right. But if you've got some core values, hire people with them core values. Do not hire people that don't agree with them core values, because that will only go one way. And Lucy, I know that sounds so simple and so basic, but I'm telling you, there is thousands and thousands of clients, customers, businesses around the world that are currently doing the reverse of what I've just said. So yeah.
And it's about that short term, isn't it? Short term, you think it'll be okay, or you think that you'll change, but actually the values part. And I definitely think if you have one poisonous client that stops the rest of your team actually working to the best. And I think that's so crucial to understand, of just being surrounded by people that you want to speak to and that you want to do your best work for.
It's interesting as well. We talk about hiring people, but it's the same with partnerships, right? So Phoenix51, we haven't got loads and loads of money yet, right? We're not cash rich at the moment. We're a startup. So we're having to beg and borrow. We're having to get really good people in on kind of, partnership contracts, 1 or 2 days a week type scenarios. And actually, so although they're not employees, they kind of are, because they are integral to our part. So making sure that you're choosing your suppliers, your partners, your employees based on that same criteria, the values, the behaviors. Do they have the same short-term, medium-term, long-term view as what we do? Have we got the same values? Do I know that actually if I could put one of our partners in front of our customer, they're going to be like Phoenix51. They're not going to be like, oh, actually, I'm going to do that myself. That's really difficult to do because they're also running their own businesses. So finding the right partnership is also crucial, especially in that early phase. You might want to have, you might want to have a team of salespeople and a team of SDRs that work in your business to sell for you. But right now you can't afford to bring that in, so you need to outsource. And you might need to outsource, 1 or 2 days a week. But how do you know? How are you policing? How do you know what that business is? How that business is representing your business? Does that make sense? So really understanding the core values and the behaviors of not just your people but your partners is crucially important.
Yeah, totally. That's one of our main values. So Lee, where should people find you? Where can people listen to more about Phoenix51 and about you?
I love people. I love you, Luce, for asking that question. So I co-host a sports podcast every single week, and I never get asked that question. So it's lovely to be able to ask one. So look, you can find me at Lee McQueen on Twitter, lee.mcqueen on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search my name up, Lee McQueen. Phoenix51 is the business that we are building and scaling. We've been going 2 years now, so we digitalize and centralize the people assessment process around behaviours and competencies. So if you're interested in that stuff, and if you're interested in, reach out to me on LinkedIn and ask me a question. It's no issue. If I can help, probably won't be able to, by the way, but if I can help, then I'll be delighted to. So yeah, that's where you can find us. Phoenix51.io is a website.
And go on then, for any Arsenal fans, what's the name of the podcast so they can find it?
Everyone's now switching off, but I am a Tottenham Hotspur season ticket holder, and I do love the Spurs, my sins. But it's the last one on Spurs. So Ricky Sachs and myself and all of the key team at Last One on Spurs, we run after every match day. We probably do 2-3 shows a week. So yeah, if you're into football, if you're into Arsenal, do not worry, don't come. You can mock us if you want, because you're top of the league, so you can come and mock us. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty successful stuff. So yeah, delighted to have some more viewers and listeners.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.